My family called me a killer. Not because I acted out of anger, not out of negligence, not out of cruelty or carelessness or spite. They called me a killer because I gave my dying mother, a woman already under hospice care, a woman who had already been told the cancer was going to take her, a woman with months left, maybe weeks, maybe less, 2 cans of her favorite drink on one of the last genuinely good nights she would ever have. 2 cans. That's all it took to fracture a family and turn the final chapter of a woman's life into a battlefield. My siblings didn't call to ask how she was doing. They called to scream. They told me I was accelerating her death. They sent messages to cousins, to aunts, to uncles, painting me as someone who would willfully harm their own dying mother for, what, exactly? A moment of ordinary human pleasure in a life that had been stripped of almost everything. Here's what they never once stopped to ask. What did she want? What made her smile that night? What does it even mean to protect someone who cannot be saved? She has liver cancer. It is terminal. The doctors are not trying to cure her anymore. They are trying to keep her comfortable while she passes. That is what hospice means. That is the reality my siblings seem entirely unable to face. And while they were burning up their phones, sending furious messages about 2 cans of beer, my mother went to sleep that night with a smile on her face. Let me take you back to where this all started. My mother has lived a complicated life. She never did anything by halves, not the laughter, not the loyalty, not, unfortunately, the habits that would eventually catch up with her. She smoked for years. Decades, really. The kind of smoking that becomes part of a person's identity, woven so deeply into daily rhythms that quitting feels like removing something structural. And then, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, she quit. Cold turkey. As far as I understood it, she never made a performance of it, that wasn't her style. But she was proud of it. Quietly, privately, deeply proud. It was one of the few battles she had won outright against herself, and she held onto that victory like something fragile and precious, because it was. But there were other battles she never quite won. Her weight had been a lifelong struggle, not the kind that resolves cleanly, just managed, negotiated with, sometimes surrendered to entirely. She was morbidly obese for most of her adult life. Type 2 diabetes sat alongside that like an unwanted houseguest who had long since stopped pretending to look for another place to stay. She managed the diabetes, but not always well, not consistently, not with the discipline the disease demanded. And for a stretch of a few years, she was drinking. Not catastrophically by some people's standards, 4 to 6 drinks a day, most days of the week, her favorite kind. A specific brand, a specific flavor she had loved for years. Those things combined over time. They stacked and layered and compounded quietly, the way damage often does. And the result, at the end of a lifetime of accumulated choices and struggles, was liver cancer. By the time anyone caught it, the cancer had already made up its mind. Terminal. No real talk of remission. When she started feeling sick, which turned out to be the cancer announcing itself, she stopped drinking almost entirely. A rare occasion here and there. Nothing like before. She knew what was happening. I think on some level, she'd known for a while. I visit my mother 2 to 3 times a week. I've been doing it consistently since she moved to in-home hospice care, through every kind of day that process involves, the manageable ones and the ones that feel unbearable. It's not always easy to walk through that door. There are days when the visits are heavy in a way I don't have good language for, when the silence in the room has a texture to it, when the equipment and the medications and the slow, quiet reality of what is happening press down on everything like a low ceiling you have to duck under just to function. But I go, because she is my mother. Because the time is finite in a way that is now official, documented, real. Because I understand, even in moments when I can't fully articulate it, that each of those visits is something I will draw on for the rest of my life. We watch television together. We talk, sometimes about significant things, sometimes about absolutely nothing. I bring her what she asks for, a specific snack she's craving, a particular magazine, a brand of something from a store that requires a detour I don't mind taking. It doesn't matter what it is. If she wants it and I can get it, I get it. That's the arrangement. One afternoon, during one of those visits, she mentioned almost offhandedly that she missed her drink of choice. The specific brand, the specific flavor she'd been having for years before everything changed. She didn't demand it. She didn't even really ask, not directly. She just said she missed it, the way you might say you miss a restaurant that closed down or a song you haven't heard in a long time. A gentle, quiet kind of longing, easy to let pass. I didn't let it pass. I listened. I didn't say anything in the moment, I just held onto it. And here is exactly where my siblings and I break from each other at a fundamental level. Because when I'm sitting beside my dying mother, I am not thinking about what the medical literature says. I am thinking about her, the actual person in front of me, and she missed something simple. So I started thinking about what it would take to give it to her. I didn't just go home and grab a six-pack without thinking. That's what my siblings seem to believe, that I acted impulsively, without any real consideration, that I just walked in one day with beer and handed it over. That is not what happened. I got a copy of her current medication list. All of it. She is on multiple medications as part of her hospice care protocol, and I was not going to approach this blind. I researched each medication individually. I looked up known interactions with alcohol. I checked dosage levels. I considered where she was in her pain management that particular week, what she had and hadn't needed. I was methodical about it. I was careful in a way that I wish my siblings would acknowledge even once. And then I waited. Hospice days are not all the same. Some days the pain is at a level she can manage. She is present, clear-headed, alert, genuinely herself. Other days the heavier medications are necessary, and those days change everything about how she processes the world around her. I waited for one of the good days. A day with no heavy pain management. A day when she was cognizant and comfortable and recognizably, fully her. When that day came, I brought her the six-pack. She lit up. I need you to hold that image for a moment, because it is the center of everything. This woman, who has been slowly dying for months, whose entire world has contracted down to the walls of her home and the faces of whoever comes through the door, who has given up nearly everything she used to love, she lit up. Not a polite smile, not performed gratitude. Genuine, immediate, uncomplicated joy. The kind that doesn't negotiate with age or circumstance. She had 2 cans, she was happy. She watched some television. She talked a little, and then she went to sleep. That was the entire incident. 2 cans of beer and a good night's rest. A few days after that evening, I updated my siblings. This is something I do regularly. I'm the one who visits most often, so I tend to be the family's main point of contact for how she's actually doing. I give them reports on the good days and the harder ones. I tell them what she talked about, how her energy was, what she asked for. I keep them connected to something they have chosen, for whatever reason, not to be directly present for. I told them about the visit. I mentioned she'd had a couple of drinks, that she'd enjoyed them, that she'd gone to sleep happy. I thought they would be glad to hear she'd had a good evening. I was wrong. The response was immediate and it was fierce. Not worried, not cautious. Not gently concerned and asking for more information before forming an opinion. Furious. They told me what I had done was harmful. They said giving someone with liver cancer any amount of alcohol was unconscionable. They accused me of causing her to die faster. They told me I should have known better, that I needed to think about what I was actually doing. I tried to explain. I walked them through the medication check. I told them about waiting for a good day, about the fact that she'd only had 2, about the fact that she herself had expressed wanting them. None of it landed. None of it moved anything. And here is what struck me most, the thing I keep returning to, even now. They were not asking how she seemed when she drank them. They were not asking whether she'd been happy. They were not asking, in any genuine way, about her experience of that evening. They were asking about her liver, about damage metrics, about whether I had technically violated some invisible protocol they had constructed from a distance. They were managing our dying mother like a liability rather than loving her like a person. And that gap, that fundamental, unbridgeable difference in how we were each approaching her final weeks, was about to split the family wide open. It didn't stay contained to my immediate siblings. That is the thing about family judgment. It is incapable of staying contained. It radiates outward. It finds its way into every corner of the extended family through the particular efficiency of people who have a strong opinion about something they know only secondhand. Within weeks, cousins had been contacted. Aunts and uncles had received their briefings. I started getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, people who had formed firm positions about something they were not present for, something they had no direct experience of, something that had been translated to them through a narrative that was not mine. And the narrative that was spreading, it wasn't careful. It wasn't nuanced. It wasn't the version where a thoughtful adult checked the medication list, waited for a good day, responded to their dying mother's expressed wish, and watched her enjoy 2 cans of something she loved before going to sleep peacefully. That version didn't circulate. The version that circulated was the one that made me reckless, careless, The one where I walked in without thinking and handed alcohol to a woman dying of liver cancer as if that were nothing. Here's a detail I want you to keep in your mind. My mother still has 4 cans left from that six-pack. They are sitting in her refrigerator right now. She hasn't touched them since that first evening. Maybe she will on a good day when the mood and the moment align. Maybe she won't. That is entirely, completely her choice. 4 cans of beer, sitting untouched in a dying woman's refrigerator. That is what people are burning relationships over. That is what the text threads and the phone calls and the recruited family members are all about. That is what weeks of sustained conflict have been constructed around. 4 cans in the fridge of a woman who is dying. Can you feel how hollow that is? Can you feel what is actually happening underneath all of this noise? Let me tell you what hospice care actually is. Because I think some people, maybe my siblings, maybe some of you listening, carry a version of it in their head that does not match what it actually means in practice. Hospice is not treatment. Hospice is not an aggressive last-ditch effort to reverse a medical situation. Hospice is the formal, medically endorsed acknowledgement that reversal is no longer possible, and that the most ethical, humane, and dignified path forward is to shift the entire goal of care. The goal is no longer to extend life. The goal is to support quality of life for whatever time remains. Comfort, dignity, presence, the ability to be oneself, to experience things that feel good, to have some agency in a situation that has stripped most of it away. That is not my personal interpretation. That is the stated, agreed-upon philosophy of palliative and hospice care, recognized by medical ethicists and the broader medical community. So when my siblings tell me I was harmful, that I was accelerating her death, I need them to sit with one question. Accelerating it toward what, exactly? She is not going to recover. The trajectory does not improve no matter what choices any of us make from here. There is no version of her future that includes a healthy liver and a long life ahead of her if she simply avoids beer for the next few months. That future does not exist. The doctors did not eliminate it because of 2 cans. The doctors eliminated it a long time ago, before I ever walked through that door with anything. What does exist is right now. This week. These visits. The moments in which she can still smile, still feel something purely enjoyable, still experience a small pleasure without any medical asterisk attached. What does exist is a woman who spent a lifetime loving certain small, specific things, her drink, her shows, her children sitting close beside her, and who deserves access to those things for every day she is still here to enjoy them. My siblings disagree, and I am the villain of this story. Here is the thought that has been circling in my mind for weeks now, completing its loop and coming back sharper each time it does. My siblings are not actually fighting about beer. At their core, they are not genuinely concerned about my mother's liver function. They cannot be, because if they were, if this were truly, sincerely about her well-being and her comfort and what is best for her remaining time, they would be at her house. They would be sitting in the chair beside her bed. They would be watching her shows with her and asking what she feels like eating and learning what she misses and finding ways, within whatever constraints exist, to give it to her. That is what you do when someone you love is dying, and you are genuinely focused on their experience of that. But that is not what they are doing. What they are doing is sending messages to me. What they are doing is building a case against me in the court of extended family opinion. What they are doing is spending the most precious thing any of us possesses right now, the remaining time our mother is still alive and present, on conflict with me. I think what is really happening is something harder to name out loud. I think they are terrified. I think the reality of losing their mother is so large and so final that they cannot look directly at it, so they need somewhere else to put their eyes. They need something to control, something to be righteously angry about, because righteous anger gives you something to do. It gives you an enemy, a cause, a direction for all that energy that grief doesn't know what to do with. Grief just sits there and asks you to feel it, and I became the thing to do instead of that. I don't say this to fully excuse them. I say it because understanding why people do what they do is more useful than being destroyed by it. But it doesn't make any of it easier to absorb. They chose me as the container for their fear. And that choice cost all of us weeks of irreplaceable peace, weeks with her, weeks that are simply gone now. Here is what cold karma looks like in a situation like this. It doesn't always arrive dramatically. It doesn't always come with a confrontation scene, a public moment of reckoning, a room full of witnesses watching the wrongdoer finally understand the weight of what they've done. Sometimes, often, actually, karma is quieter than that, more internal, more permanent. My siblings are going to bury our mother. That moment is coming. And when it does, when the hospice visits have ended, when the last good day has passed without anyone marking it as such, when the house goes quiet in that specific way that only grief creates, they will be left alone with everything they did with the time they had. Some of what they did was write angry messages about beer. They will remember spending weeks in conflict with their own sibling over something as small and human and ordinary as a can of someone's favorite drink. They will remember that while their mother was still breathing, still able to recognize faces, still having moments of warmth and comfort and ordinary pleasure, still here, they spent a portion of those moments on accusation and recruitment and grievance, building their case, finding their allies, being right. I will remember something entirely different. I will remember the look on her face when I walked in with that six-pack. I will remember her reaching for the can, cracking it open, taking that first sip with the unhurried, uncomplicated satisfaction of someone tasting something they genuinely missed. I will remember how ordinary the whole evening was, not cinematic, not soaked in meaning, not a grand gesture. Just good, just comfortable, just her being herself for a few hours. That is the difference between what I gave her and what they withheld from themselves. She got a few hours of simple, real happiness during a season when those hours were almost gone. They got weeks of conflict that will dissolve into nothing the moment she passes, because nothing they argued will matter then. Only what they did, only what they gave, only what they made her feel. That trade, they made it freely every single day, and they will carry it. It has been weeks since that evening. My mother is still here. She is still receiving hospice care. She still has good days and harder ones, still watches her shows, still asks me to bring her things when I visit, and I still bring them. That part of what we are to each other has not changed. The 4 remaining cans from that six-pack are still in her refrigerator. She hasn't opened them. Maybe she will. On a good evening when the day has been manageable and something in her wants a taste of something familiar and her. Maybe she won't. That decision belongs entirely to her. What matters, the only thing that matters about those 4 cans, is that they are there when she decides she wants one. I already said yes. She doesn't have to ask. My siblings and I have not resolved things. I don't know that we will, at least not before we are forced to face something much harder and more final together. The volume of the conflict has come down somewhat, not because anyone changed their minds about anything, but because sustaining that level of righteous fury alongside everything else that life requires is simply exhausting. People run low on the energy for it eventually. I've stopped trying to convince them. I've come to understand that some people, when confronted with a situation that challenges their sense of control, will maintain their position not because it is correct, but because changing it would require admitting they spent irreplaceable time on the wrong thing. That is a deeply painful admission to make. I'm not going to demand it from them. What I know, what I will always know, is that my mother had a good night. She tasted something she had loved for years and missed for months. She went to sleep comfortable, and maybe even a little happy. In a season defined almost entirely by loss and pain and the slow dismantling of everything she used to be, I gave her something ordinary and real and joyful. I would do it again, without hesitation, every single time. There is a version of this story where the lesson is about siblings and arguments and who was technically, medically, ethically correct. And I understand why people want to debate that version. It's easier. It has clear sides. But I think the story underneath that story is about something more fundamental, about what we actually do with the time that is right in front of us. Because my mother was dying the day I brought her that six-pack. She was dying the day my siblings launched their campaign against me. She is dying right now as you hear these words. That fact has not changed, was never going to change, could not have been changed by anything any of us did or didn't do. The only variable, the only thing any of us ever actually controlled, was what we chose to do while she was still here. I chose to sit with her, to show up week after week, for the hard visits and the quiet ones and the ones where the television was the only sound. I chose to bring her what she asked for. I chose to listen when she said she missed something, and to find a way to give it to her. I chose to make one ordinary evening feel like something a little bit like her old life. My siblings chose something else. They chose to spend some of those weeks on a conflict that will mean absolutely nothing the moment she takes her last breath. Because no accusation, no angry message, no successfully recruited aunt or uncle will matter then. What will matter is what you did, what you brought, what you made her feel in the time she had left. Cold karma isn't always loud. Sometimes it is just the quiet, permanent weight of knowing later, when it is far too late to change anything, that you chose wrong when every chance was still open. She deserved those 2 cans. She deserved every simple pleasure that remained to her. And the people who spent weeks fighting about 4 cans of beer sitting untouched in a refrigerator, they will carry that choice. Quietly, privately, long after she is gone. If this story hit you somewhere real, drop a like and pass it along to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Cold Karma, because justice doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it arrives as a memory you can't escape.